I will ask you questions. I will ask you questions which you can answer in the chat, but I'd like you to continue to use the chat as a way of engaging. So if you hear something that you agree with, write the insight into the chat, write it in a few words. If you have a question, write it into the chat. If you have something you disagree with or something you want to add to, just keep the chat rolling, because that's how we create energy in a virtual space. And for me, it's also really good to know that I'm actually speaking to an audience that's present out there and that's listening and that's engaging. So it really helps me out as well. So let's use this chat. Make sure that when you are using the chat to put your comments into panelists and attendees, because when you log on, sometimes it only shows panelists. So use the chat. Let's see you all coming in, and just say hi or whatever it is in the meantime, where you're from. I know you've had quite a few people already introducing themselves, so continue to do that. And today I've got a very exciting topic. So I know a lot of you are coaches, studying and learning about coaching and wanting to improve your journey. And today we're going to look at a specific part of what does it mean to be a coach to CEOs. Now, I am a CEO coach and I work with a lot of CEOs. I also have a team who coaches leaders in organizations, because the role of a CEO is to develop this, beyond developing themselves into an extraordinary leader, it's to develop the next layer of leadership. So a lot of what I'm going to be sharing with you applies to different layers of leadership, not necessarily just to CEOs, and even to ourselves as people who are leading others, leading a business, leading ourselves. There's a lot of stuff that you can relate to. So let's dive in, and I am going to begin with my personal story. I'm going to take you back 9 years to 2012, August 2012, where I found myself at the top of Kilimanjaro. Okay, the tallest mountain in Africa. It stands 6,000 meters above sea level. And I decided to climb this thing, to take on this challenge and climb. So I have to just tell you, give you some background. From childhood, I was definitely not a sporty person at all. Taking on a mountain climb was not something that I would do. In fact, I was a little bit of a nerd, I will admit. I actually, before I became a coach, I was an actuary. So that's all about numbers and statistics and trends and modeling. And I used to love maths as a child, absolutely love maths. And I would prefer to read a book or solve a maths problem or a riddle rather than go out and exercise. In fact, for me, if I could get away from exercising, that would be the best thing. So how did I find myself doing this challenge? Well, actually, together with that, I love challenges. So when I come across something that is a question about whether I can do it or not, I always say yes. And when this opportunity to climb Kilimanjaro came along, I said yes, because I really wanted to see if I could do it. I wanted to prove myself that actually I can do something that's really, really hard, even though it's physical and it's not exactly in my own kind of comfort zone, very much outside my comfort zone. And I decided to say yes and go for it. So as some of you may know, a mountain climb like this takes a lot of preparation. There's training, there's skills, there's gear, there's the team, there's the plan. You've got to plan out this whole trip really, really well. And even with all the planning and all the preparation and all the training, reaching the summit almost didn't happen for me. So this is the point that I got to, which is about 1,000 meters before we reached the summit. And actually at the moment, this was taken just as the sun was starting to rise. But just before that, when it was pitch black, I had reached my breaking point. I thought I could not take another step. I got to the point where I was absolutely exhausted. I was frozen. I couldn't even move my fingers because they were frozen solid. I was so cold. I was exhausted. I could not take another step. So what happened? So as I was sitting there, I actually took a break. I sat on a rock. I was frozen and, as I said, exhausted. My guide came up to me and he said a few words of encouragement to me. He said, I know how hard this is. I know how hard you've worked. And I know you can do it. You can do it. Don't think of the whole journey that still has to come. Just think of one more step. Just think of this next step that you have to take, and then take one more and one more. And that's it. Just focus on what's the little part of the journey that's in front of you, and I'm with you. And at that point, it's like something shifted in my mind, and I got up and I took one more step. And then I took one more. and then I took one more. And my guide's words really reminded me of who I am, why I was there, that I wasn't alone in this journey, and that I'd worked hard for it, and that I can do it. And in this way, my mindset and my focus shifted from maybe I can't do this to maybe I can. And that's when I really realized I got to the top, exhausted and elated. And I have to say that at this point, all the things that got me to this point, the preparation, the skills, the knowledge, the training, the guides, all of the things that I knew about this trip and that I'd prepared for were not the things that got me to the top. Because what got me to the top was what happened inside me in that moment that I switched and was able to take that one step. That moment that I said, I can't, I'm exhausted, I'm done, to the moment that I actually said, oh, maybe I can. And I got up and took one more step. So that's when I realized it's not about all the stuff that goes before then. It's really about what happens inside of me that enables me to push even further, to go that one step further. And I love Edmund Hillary's quote that says, it's not the mountain that we conquer, but ourselves. And that's the journey. That's the journey of life. It's the journey of leadership. It's the journey of business, of CEO. Doesn't matter where you are. And we have to understand that the mountain is there. The mountain doesn't care if we climb it or not. The mountain doesn't care what the weather is. The mountain doesn't care what time of day it is. The mountain stands there. If we want to do something, we need to dig deep inside ourselves and really say what is required to take that next step. So this is really the idea behind the whole concept of what got you here won't get you there. And I'm going to talk about it in the context of leadership. And I think as coaches, I really do believe that while we can coach anyone and everyone, and that the coaching skills are really similar across different areas that we're coaching in, if we have a contextual understanding of what people are going through, then we can coach better. And that's my belief. So when I talk about leadership gap, what do I mean by that? It's that whole concept of what got you here won't get you there. So just like on my Kilimanjaro trip, I got to a certain point where I realized something different is going to need me to get to that next level. Same with leadership. We often get to a point, and our clients will get to a point. So thanks, bring those comments in. Thank you so much. I love seeing it, inspiring, nice. Thank you so much. Please keep those comments coming. So when we work with leaders, we know that at every point in the leadership journey, they work hard. We work hard to get to a certain level of success, to get to a certain level of achievement. And if we talk about CEOs, to get to that title or promotion of CEO, and that's regardless of whether it's in a big organization or it's opening your own business. When you're opening your own business, you're CEO of your own business. But we worked hard to get to that point. And when we get to that point, we always come to a stage where we realize there is more that's required in order to really lead at that point, in order to really bring the full success of it. All of a sudden, we need different things. So we know that the knowledge, skills, expertise, experience, all those things that have brought us to this point of, wow, you've done really well, you got that promotion, you got the CEO role, and then you take a step back and look at it for a minute and you go, okay, now I need a new level of skills. Now it's really about managing and leading people. It's about looking at myself in a different way. How do I show up? How do I stand up for what I believe? It's about setting a vision and direction, and how do I do all of that? And there's a different level of skill that's really required. And it's really a lot about how deep can we dig inside ourselves to look at our behaviors and how we show up as leaders to ourselves, our people, and our business. And that's really what I'm going to focus on. So for the rest of our time today, I'm going to give you a little bit of context on the life of a CEO. And as I said, it applies to leaders as well, anybody in a leadership position. So we've spoken about the leadership gap and what that means. We're going to look at what are the 3 painful problems that CEOs face, what are the common myths, and then how can we create habits? And these are habit stacks, because there are thousands of habits, and we really need to be able to identify. And here's where our role as a coach comes in so specifically, because everybody goes on their own unique journey. And as coaches, we need to be able to help our people, our clients, identify what they need and how to work on that, and then we're going to look at how to make habits stick. So there's a lot to cover here today, and I'm going to go through it quite quickly. I'd love to get questions from you as well, and you know, dive deeply into any of the areas if we get a chance in the Q&A session. Okay, so let's look at the CEO painful problems. And I would like to, as I go through these problems, I'm going to share 3 problems with you. I'd like to hear from you in the chat if you have ever come across it, experienced it yourself, or seen someone else go through it. And this is painful problem number 1. So if you can relate, just type 1 into the chat so we can see if you relate or not, if you've heard about it, or if you've seen it in others. Okay. So here's the first painful problem. If you've seen this, that you or someone you've worked with is frustrated with your speed, with your team's speed of execution that doesn't quite match your own, because as a leader, you are constantly chasing deliverables or firefighting a crisis. And this is something I hear from my clients often, is like, either this team is not working fast enough, it's not on the same level, I am 100 paces ahead of where my team's at, constantly chasing, constantly firefighting. In fact, a client told me earlier this week that they're going to buy a fire hydrant and keep it in their office because they feel like they're constantly putting out the fires. And I see ones coming in, so great, you relate, or you know someone who is going through this, and this is a common problem that we see for sure. Okay, so are you ready for problem 2? Yes, and I agree, it's not just for CEO, absolutely, it's anybody who is in a situation where they're leading a team, so absolutely. Keep those coming. Love the comments. Yeah, I love the energy in this room. Love it. Okay. Painful problem number 2. Let's have a look. Tired of receiving negative feedback about your leadership style and approach. And this one is such an important one because actually, either you'll receive the negative feedback or it will just be in the rumor mill and in the gossip, right, in the corridors, because people won't often tell you what they think. If they tell you, then you're already at a better space, but often people won't tell you what they think of your style and approach. And really what happens here is because you're so busy chasing those deliverables. Our CEOs are so you can type 2 for this one. I see some ones coming in, but if you relate here, type a 2 for this one, because this is painful problem number 2. Our CEOs are so busy running after those deliverables and the targets and the measures that they don't have time to focus on people. And if I can tell you how many times I've heard, I just don't have the time to manage people. I've got so much to do. So you can talk about that. They won't often tell you, because especially CEO, people want to do what you are asking them to do. People want to be impressive to you. So yes, absolutely. This is a key problem, and there's a whole lot of things around that. How much communication is there in this whole area as well? Okay, so let's move on to painful problem number 3. And this one also, let's see if you relate, and type 3 in the comments if you can relate, or if you know someone who experiences this. And this is the problem of it's lonely at the top. Because as CEO, you are holding responsibility for absolutely everything. So even though you've got a team and you've got people around you all the time, it actually feels like you're pretty lonely. And here's also where imposter syndrome comes in. So when we're at a CEO level or leadership level, we feel like we have to hold it all together. We have to have the answers for everything. Everyone's looking at us for solutions, for direction, for motivation, for whatever it is. And then we often feel like we are just winging it. We don't know what we're doing. I'm going to be found out soon. I hear that from our CEOs as well. Just now someone will find out that I don't really know everything and they expect me to. So that's where it feels lonely. And the gap between you and your team just seems like it's getting wider and wider, because while you are leading and supporting, you feel like you don't really have anyone to talk to, anyone that you can vent with. So that's also, the third painful problem. And I see those 3 things. Yeah, lots of being able to relate to it, seeing it around us, even though sometimes we don't experience it ourselves. But how do we know this? And really, I want to say I know this because these are the themes that have emerged from the many, many clients that I've worked with. And I want to share Ben's story with you, which is one client, which could be the story in variation of so many different clients, and you might be able to relate to this story as well. So here we have Ben, who's the CEO of a startup. He had funding secured, he had a great team in place, he really got the business going, and they were doing well. until he got to the point where he felt stuck in the loop of doing all the things that had brought him success in the past, which helped the business to get going and get started up. But at some point, the business growth has stalled. The team isn't stepping up as much as they should. He's still way too involved in everything, and he wasn't seeing the breakthrough result he needed in order to really take the business forward. So he got to a certain level and he needed something different to help him get to that next level. So I don't know if you've worked with people. If you have, then just again, let's go back to one or give a thumbs up and tell us that you have seen this. But we know that we get to a point where we hit that plateau. What happened with Ben? Got to a point where he hit that plateau, that place of what got you here won't get you there. He hit that leadership gap because he kept on trying to do it all himself. He kept on trying to hold all the control himself, and you can't. You've got to be able to understand how you bring your people in and how you work together to really take your results forward. So this is one of those elements of the gap where you're so used to getting results based on your own performance that there's a shift that needs to happen where you really need to trust your team and bring them together to get that next level of results. So what Ben did, what Ben said actually after working with him on his leadership thinking and his habits, because the way that I look at it is how do we build the habits that are going to help you be that leader to take your business forward. He actually said it's about structuring my thinking, changing small behaviors and cultivating the habits that work for me. And here's where our job as coaches is really important, because it's not about a one size fits all. It's really about understanding your client and saying, what are the habits that you're working with them to understand what are the habits that you need in order to take you forward. And when he got clear on what he wanted, we built the roadmap of leadership habits he needed to consistently lead himself, his team, and his business to success. And then we saw big shifts in his team performance and business results. And it was really, really amazing to see. So I also want to add here that, first of all, this leadership habit roadmap is unique to each individual. This is our strength as coaches. And the second thing is that it's small steps, just like my Kilimanjaro thing. I only needed to think of that one step in order to get up and move again. And same with our leadership journey, small steps that will get us forward. And what's really important here is, just like I said before, that mindset shift. It's what happens inside of us that really helps us to take that next leap forward. And that's in our mindset, in our thinking, in our way of seeing things. And our mindset is our superpower. So if we can work with that, then we really achieve amazing things. So what I want to say here is, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of the book Mindset by Carol Dweck. And when we talk about growth mindset, which is really about learning, taking risks, trying new things, this is so critical to what I speak about as well, because the fixed mindset is about staying in that zone of safety and security and what I know, and what's worked in the past will work again. And our role as coaches is to come here and say, how do we develop this growth mindset? How do we ask questions, to think and stretch and look at things differently and try different things, and then look at it and say what worked and what didn't work. And it's all about cultivating that growth mindset. So here's a tool that I'd love to offer to you if you want to go and check it out. I created this mindset quiz based on Carol Dweck's book. Do you have a growth or a fixed mindset? It's something that you can test for yourself, use it with your clients if you want to. Go to this link, daphnaHorowitz.com/mindset, and you can access the quiz and see where it's at. I found it a useful tool because a lot of people think they have a growth mindset, and then they do this quiz and they get a little bit of a shock. So I'm giving you a bit of a warning here, but they get a bit of a shock because they think, oh my gosh, I thought I was better than this. But what's really great about this tool is that you can go back to the questions and actually say, oh, maybe in this situation, I have more of a fixed mindset, or in this situation, I have more of a growth mindset. And that's what it's about, because I also believe that it is situational. There are situations where we're going to have more of a fixed or growth mindset, and that's something we can work with. So enjoy this and let me know how that goes for you. So the CEO journey, it's really going from that place of being a high achiever, being used to getting the results that you've always got from your, as I said, knowledge, experience, expertise, everything that you've done well in the past, and now understanding you need to turn into a leader. You need to get results through other people. You need to do things differently. You need to shift your mindset, cultivate a growth mindset to really bring people along and get to that next level of what it means to be a good leader and one that gets results. So now I'm going to discuss the common myths, and I'm going to go through this quickly as well. And again, let's do the same thing. So as we go through them, if you can relate, or if you've heard of this myth, or if you've seen it in practice from yourself or from others, type 1 into the chat and let's go. What's the first myth? So the first myth that we often hear is that being a great CEO is about performance and targets. And often I will hear this statement, as long as I'm hitting the targets, everything is fine. Because the truth is, targets are important, performance is important. That's what CEOs get measured on with their board. So they need to drive those. But it's not all and everything. What is the reality? The reality is that CEOs get hired for results and fired for style. And I see this often because the CEOs or CXOs or people in leadership positions get noticed. You get noticed for your results and what you're achieving. And then you might be headhunted by another firm. You might be given an offer. And then all of a sudden, if there's a mismatch in style, if there's a mismatch in culture fit, then they let go. And I have an example of someone that I worked with their team. The CEO didn't think that he needed coaching at all. He brought us in, me and my team, in to coach the next layer of leadership. And it very quickly became apparent that the CEO's style was shocking, but he was incredibly talented, very, very good, got results, turned this business around, and got headhunted by another organization in the same industry to come and be their CEO. So he left, much to the relief of his team, very happy when he left, went to the new business, and within 6 months, he was fired because that business did not tolerate his bullying approach, his command and tell approach. He's not letting anybody think for themselves, not developing the team, and they let him go. So this is something that's really relevant because we know that your leadership style determines how people connect to you, how much they want to be led by you, and how much they will go the extra mile for you. So you get even better results when you're a better leader. And that is something that we see in practice, but not all CEOs are convinced of that. So common myth 2, let's move into this one. This one, I actually alluded to it earlier. It's about, I'm just not a people person. If I could get on with my work and everybody would just get on with their job, it would be so much easier. I'd love to know if you've ever heard this before, if you come across it, because I come across it quite a lot. And this is when I actually say to people, the people stuff is your job. You cannot separate your work as a CEO or a leader from leading people, because regardless of whether you're a people person or not, you now need to shift your mindset to getting results through other people, and it's not all based on you. So leadership is about leading people, not just results. We know this. And when you're leading people, your top priority is the well-being and success of your people, because that is when they will go the extra mile for you. So, that should say common myth number 3. So, okay, we've got here some comments, never heard 2. Well, that's really, really awesome. And I think when I introduce these common myths, what I do say is that if you haven't heard of them, then, I mean, if you haven't heard it in your circle, that's absolutely fine. Be aware that there is this thinking out there, and you might come across something like that, or you might come across coaching someone whose manager thinks like that. So just be aware that there is this kind of thinking and how you can work with it. And then this is actually common myth number 3. So prior successes do not guarantee future successes. Oh, sorry. The myth is that prior successes guarantee future successes. And if I stick to the strategies that have worked in the past, keep tight controls and take ownership of everything, I'll continue to be successful. This is common myth number 3. So if you can relate, if you've heard this before, please type a 3 into the chat box. I'd love to see. And I think what's important here, and this is a little bit of that what got you here won't get you there principle, or the Peter principle, if anyone's heard of it, is that everything that you've known has got you to this point, and you believe that that is what's going to take you that step further. You also believe that you have to have all the answers, that people are looking to you to guide and direct and know everything. And this is where imposter syndrome starts to come in, because it's a lot of pressure. And sometimes we don't feel like we know what we're doing, and we're constantly doubting ourselves. So that's a little bit of this related to this myth. And the reality here is that you get to a level of success that requires you to do things differently from a leadership point of view. And this is where you really need to let go more, share leadership, trust your people. You're not an island, and believing that you are keeps you at the plateau and in the leadership gap. So let's look at what do we do? How do we work with these? I think this gives us a little bit of context in terms of what our CEOs and leaders are coming in with. And what I want to share with you is those 3 habit stacks, that really 3 areas that really need some attention and focus in order to leap through that leadership gap and get to the next level. So what is the first one? The first habit stack is about being confident and self-aware. And what I say here is that it is about cultivating self-leadership habits so that you know yourself better, you're aware of your zone of genius and blind spots, and you can really show up as a leader that people want to follow. The second one is about being connected and inspiring. And this is all about developing team leadership habits, which is about relationships, building trust with all your different stakeholders so that people want to go the extra mile for you, no matter who they are. People around you create an environment and a culture where they want to be part of this high-performing team, connected team, and people feel motivated and want to come to work every single day. And then the third one is all about courage and clarity. And this is about building business leadership habits. It's about the business. It's about creating that big vision, that strategy that will take the company forward, that will move the needle in terms of what it means to be a successful business, and also making some of those tough decisions. And again, as coaches, we are critical here. We are key to helping our CEOs and leaders and clients walk this path, walk this leadership path to get to where they want to be as an extraordinary CEO. Now, this, again, I'm going to bring it into habits, because when we cultivate habits that will take us to this place, to these places, then we will really, build a holistic path. I call it the leadership habit roadmap to get us to extraordinary leadership. And habits are so important because the truth is that our brain works based on automating things so that they take less energy from us. And that's what habits really mean. It means that we create something, the more it becomes automated, it becomes a habit in our brain, and then it's just really easy to keep doing. Now, the one thing with habits that I really want to say is that our brain automates everything that we repeat, right? So whether it's a good habit or a bad habit, our brain doesn't make any value judgment about it. If we are going to repeat something, it will get automated and it will get turned into a habit. And this is why we need to be conscious of what are the habits that are going to serve us as leaders, as coaches, as CEOs. Which habits do we want to automate? So then we keep on repeating those and get to the place of being extraordinary. So what I'd like to do now, well, let me stop for a moment and just see if there's are there any comments, questions or thoughts at this stage that I'd love to see, because the next stage for me is to introduce you to, yes.
Sorry, there are questions in the Q&A, but would you want to take it now or would you want to take it at the end?
Write those questions in. I'm giving you a pause because I'd like to do them all at the end. So that will be really good to see. So we'll review those. So keep them coming. And in the chat box, write your thoughts, your what's coming up for you as I speak about this. And I see there's a couple of comments. So yeah, additional extraordinary habits is making complicated things simple and excellent conflict resolution skills. Exactly, we're going to be looking at that. That's exactly what I'm going to introduce to you now, is my extraordinary CEO habit framework that I use. I'm going to share it with you. And again, I'm going to just repeat, as coaches, we know there is no one size fits all here, right? We know that every CEO, every client has to develop their own roadmap of what it is that we need to work on, whether it's the things we're really good at to build on or the things that we are not so good at and we need to improve. So what I've done here is I've created a framework that really you can use to work with your people. I've even given you some examples in each area, but you will know that each one will be tweaked for your client. Okay, so we'll start with this, and in the middle, we've got a Venn diagram, and in the middle, we've got our extraordinary leader. What does it mean to be an extraordinary leader? we know that an extraordinary leader needs to be confident, connected, and courageous, which really means that confident, you've got to own it, you've got to love it, and you've got to go for it. It's like what comes from inside, how you relate to the people around you, and then taking action and actually going for it. So I'm bringing the 3 leadership habit stacks that I talked about before. The first one is all about expanding identity with self-leadership habits. So that's looking inwards and saying, how do I need to develop and grow in order to be the best possible leader? The second is about enhancing your impact with team leadership habits. And when I talk about team, I talk about all your stakeholders. They all form part of your team with a specific emphasis on the team that reports to you. And this is about impact. What is the impact that I'm having? What are the relationships? Is it a two-way street, or is it just me telling everyone, throwing my weight around and telling them what to do? And then the third is all about elevating results with business leadership habits, which is really then about taking the business forward and making those difficult decisions, creating clarity around where you're going, the direction, and all of those good things. Now, I want to say that usually what happens is we see people focus on 3. We start with 3. We need results, we need deliverables, we need to chase those performance metrics. So that's what I'm going to do, and that's where I'm going to start. And I say, no, with this framework, we start with 1. First, understand who you are and what your particular strengths are. Then moving into bringing people along, because when you're a CEO, you are going to get results through your people. So you need those skills. And in that way, when you focus on 1 and 2 first, you really get to elevate results. And all 3 are important, because if you only look at enhancing impact, your team and your business, then you feel lost because you've lost your sense of identity. If you only focus on identity, yourself and your business, you're lonely because you haven't cultivated the team and the environment and the support network for yourself to work effectively. And if you only focus on identity, yourself and your team, and you kind of let go of the business results that you need, then you find yourself stuck in a loop of doing the same things and not being able to really traverse to that next level. So now I'm going to give you 3 key things that I found in each of these habit stacks that keep repeating themselves, that really make for good pathway of building the right best leadership habits for our extraordinary CEOs. And the first one here, which I absolutely love working with, is the zone of genius. Need to discover what is the zone of genius of the client that we are working with. Because when you are working on your zone of genius, you get amazing results and you feel fulfilled at the same time. We know that when we work with people constantly on what they're not doing well, just brings them down, and it doesn't help to get the results that we want. So understand, get your clients to know their zone of genius, help them find it so that you can really build on that and get the results that you want. I spoke about the growth mindset and getting feedback. So this is really important. It's about growth mindset, trying new things, making mistakes, allowing others to make mistakes, learning and growing from those, and constantly getting feedback. So I'm a big believer. This is where our blind spots come in, and we need to know what our blind spots are. So I don't advocate spending all our time on our blind spots, but we need to know what they are. And for that, we need to get feedback from others, because we are not going to know what they are on our own. And then the third is really about bounce back ability. And this is about resilience. We're going through, I mean, this has been a crazy year. I think we all know, crazy chaos, crisis, and all of that to manage. I mean, some companies have been, thriving in this environment, but mostly, even on a personal level, been really tough. So we need to know how to bounce back. We need to have the habits that help us to be productive and effective and resilient, and know how to cope with chaos and uncertainty and crisis. So that's in the first habit stack. The second, about enhancing impact, begins with building trust and sharing leadership. It's not all on your head. Just because you're the CEO, just because you're the leader, doesn't mean that you have to do everything, know everything, and keep tight controls of everything. In fact, that's how you start to lose momentum. So work on building trust, sharing leadership, effective delegation, clear communication, huge, huge topic. The number of times I work with CEOs who think they're communicating and think they're giving the message across, but their people are not hearing them properly, or they're not getting the essence of the message. And that's the responsibility of the leader. If people aren't understanding what you're saying, go back to look at How do I say it differently? What am I not coming across clearly? Where am I not coming across clearly, and how can I work on that? And then the sixth one is resolving conflict. And this, I think someone mentioned earlier, really, really important. And I always say, we want conflict. Firstly, conflict is a reality. You are going to get conflict. And together with that, we want conflict. Conflict shows you that there's a diversity of thinking and people. We want to encourage that, because if everybody agreed with you all the time, you also would not be moving forward. But what we want to do is we want to build healthy conflict, healthy diversity, and know how to resolve it when it gets a little bit tough, which it always does. So I say, rather than avoid it, accept it, encourage it, see it as the positive that it is, and have the skills to be able to resolve it and move forward. And then in our third habit stack, we begin with a clear vision and strategy. Really, really critical for CEOs and leaders to be clear on that, to communicate it clearly, and really have people buying into this vision and strategy. Then we have career and legacy. So we always want to know, we always want to be forward thinking in terms of where are we going? What is the legacy we're living? And I'm a big advocate for leaders who have to build leaders behind them, because you are not going to be around forever. And I am going to put in a little bit of a situation that we're in Israel, where we have had our leader for the last 12 years, and he hasn't really developed a leadership pipeline, hasn't built leaders to follow him, because he thinks he's going to be our prime minister forever. And I just think that's a big mistake. So the true mark of a leader is someone who knows that there are enough people coming along who can lead behind them, so that you can take the company forward and create sustainability. And then, of course, tough decisions, huge part of any leadership role for CEOs. I would say most of their day is taken up with decisions. You don't want to be the bottleneck. You want to keep them moving forward. So it's about empowering the layer below you to make decisions on their own, and also being able to take those tough decisions that are going to constantly move the needle forward, keep your business in momentum. So that's the framework, and I'd love to hear, what are your thoughts about the framework? Please write into the chat. This is something that I've worked on from years. So I've been an executive coach for the last 15 years, really focusing on CEOs. I've got a team who coaches the next layer of leadership, and it's something that has come from my years of working with senior leadership levels. And I'd love to hear what you think of that. And if you can relate, and if it sounds good, if I've missed anything out, please do write in the chat. I'd love to hear, and I'm going to check it out later, because what I want to move on now is I want to go into, okay, so what is leadership habit mastery? We've got the framework, we understand the areas, we understand the stacks. We need to go deeply into it to understand what are the specific things that our CEO clients need to work on to build their habit mastery. So the first place is really about going deep. So you really understand the key habits that hold you back, and that mindset is often the root issue of what's there. So really working at the level of mindset and understanding what applies to you if you want to gain mastery over habits. You also want to get practical, because this is about doing. So you gain an understanding, and then you want to take action, because we know whatever gets repeated gets automated, gets turned into a habit, so it requires action. You also want to keep yourself accountable. So you can't go it alone. Perfect opportunity for us as coaches to help here. But it's also not just the coaches, it's also bringing the context, the environment, the community in. So engaging people, encourage your CEO clients to engage people around them to ensure that they're hardwiring their new habits. And then feedback. Feedback is critical, because people will tell you what's working well and what's not. And if you create an environment where you can have open feedback and keep learning and growing, then that's ideal. So where do you start? I'm going to show you this little formula that I often work with, because I think it is something that just works in every context. We start with vision. What do you want? Add your zone of genius. What are the things that you are specifically talented and passionate about? Because those are the things that will take you from where you are now to your zone of genius. Minus the blind spots. Understand your blind spots, know what they are so that you can avoid them. It's like, you know, those hurdle races where you can just jump over the hurdles. I don't believe in spending a lot of time trying to fix blind spots, because I think no one's perfect. Everybody's got stuff that they're great at and stuff that they're less good at. It's important to know what we're not good at, so we can bring the right people in to take care of those areas and maneuver ourselves around them. But we want to focus on the zone of genius. And then from that assessment, you build the habits to make your vision a reality. And that's what becoming an extraordinary CEO with a winning team who gets results is all about. So how do we make habits stick? I'm going to give you 4 tips here for really making habits stick. The first one is creating a trigger. What can you link it to? So when we want to build a new habit, and I'm going to give you an example from me. So remember I said I'm not very sporty, and I still am not to this day, working very hard on those habits. But when I climbed Kilimanjaro, part of the training was getting fit. And for me, what I found is that running is the best thing. It's actually the only form of exercise that I enjoy doing, because I can listen to some books, or I can listen to good music or whatever, and I go out, breathe fresh air. So for me, it works. But still, it's very hard for me, excuse me, to get out and run every day. So what I do, I create a trigger. So something for me is that even if I don't feel like running, but I know that I want to or I need to, I'll just get changed into my running clothes. And that's my trigger. So I'm not saying to myself, go for a run. I'm saying just put on your running clothes. That creates the trigger for my run. Another one is that if I'm in the middle of a good book, an audio book, and I really want to listen to it, the trigger is I want to listen to the next chapter of the book rather than going for a run. So I'll know that I'll put it in, go for a run, and listen as I'm running. So you create a trigger and you link it to something that you like. Yes, and an anchor, also very, very good. Tell us what your anchor is, Bill. I'd love to hear about that, but that also works. Then keep it small. Break it down into tiny steps and build from there. So again, with my running, I never say to myself, okay, you're now going to go for a 10-kilometer run. I say to myself, just go round the block once, just round the block. And I know that once I get out and I'm starting to run, I'm going to go into that 5-6 Ks. If I feel like it, I'll go a little bit longer. But keep it small, break it down, just like that small step in my breakdown moment on Kilimanjaro. I just had to think of the next step. Then the third one is tracking it. I mean, this is something that really is helpful. If you can track your progress and see progress, then it really helps with consistency. And what I've got is I've got an app where I've set myself a goal that I want to do 1,000 kilometers a year. So my app keeps adding the kilometers that I do. So every time I see it, I get encouraged to do more. I can see how much I need, how much I've done. I also like to see my pace and improve on that. So that's something that I use. The 4-21 rule is from a brain perspective. If you do something 4 times, then you're likely to be in a bit of a groove. So it gives you that groove to continue. And then 21 times, they say you've created a habit. So think of it just 4 times, start with that, track the 4 times, and build onto 21, and then you get to your consistent habit. And finally, of course, reward yourself, make it worthwhile. So I know I'm going for a run on a hot summer's day. I have an ice cream in the freezer that I come back, and that's my reward, because to me, there's nothing better than coming in all hot and sweaty and then having a wonderful ice cream at the end. So reward yourself, think of the reward that's going to work for you, make it worthwhile, and that's how we make habits stick. And again, as coaches for ourselves, for our clients, think about those steps in terms of making it easy for your clients, for ourselves to build our habits and make them stick. And then finally, really, really important to always be in conversation. And this is something that we as coaches really know. Our profession is built on conversation, but it's an incredibly important habit for leaders, and one that I find is a little bit lacking a lot of the time. So it's things like listening, asking questions, being curious. This is something we want to demonstrate to our clients through how we do it, and also give them some feedback about it if we see that they're not there in terms of their own leadership of people. So get into conversation, get them talking, listening. Listening is a big one. I'll just share a funny story with a client who said to me, you know what, I just really struggle to listen. I talk so much. I know I talk. I know that someone comes and tells me something and I'm already telling them my ideas and thoughts. And I said to him, you know what, I've got the perfect solution for you to learn how to listen rather than talk. So he said, yes, please tell me what it is. So I said to him, every time you want to talk, just close your mouth. That's it. Don't open your mouth. Someone comes to speak to you, keep your mouth closed. Just be aware of that. So he just laughed, of course, but it is something that is difficult to do. And that's a habit. We can help our clients practice those habits by making them easy and simple. and working on those. So I've got a giveaway for you. I've recently launched my book, Weekly Habits for Extraordinary Leaders, and there's a free sample available on my website. So you can absolutely go there, download your free sample, and you can start reading the book. If you want to buy the book, it is available on Amazon, and I appreciate support always. But it's really, this is a book that's written in a way that's simple, that helps people to build habits. And I want to say here, habits are not always habits of doing. They're also habits of thinking. So sometimes just thinking differently about something and getting into a habit of thinking differently is something we can really, really help our clients work with and achieve. So that's available for you. And then I want to end with this quote from Aristotle, which I really love, and I've got my own tweak to it. And yes, thank you. Habits of thinking and feeling, you're right. And the quote goes like this: we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. And I tweak that a little bit and I say, leadership then is not an act, but a habit, because I really think every single one of us can step into our leadership by creating habits that help us to show up as leaders, bring people around us, and create the results that we want to create in our lives. Thank you so much. I'm happy to take questions. And yeah, I'll hand over to you.
So thank you so much, Daphna, and love the energy that you had and you created in the room. It was so, so wonderful to listen to you. I don't think I blinked even for a moment in the entire session. Yeah, it was really, really wonderful. I love the framework that you have shared and how crisp and how to the point it was. And I'm sure the audience is resonating with what I'm saying. So I will look at the questions now. The questions in the Q&A group. What questions could help a coachee to get unstuck?
Let me pull up the question and answer as well. And I want to, if I may add, please also feel free to write what is your takeaway from the session in the chat. So as I'm answering questions, I'd love to know what is your takeaway. Write those in the chat and I'll have a look. So are you reading from the Q&A?
I'm reading from the Q&A. So the Q&A question is, what question could help a coachee get unstuck?
What question could help a coachee get unstuck? Okay, so the best question, in my opinion, and it's one that you can use anywhere, is start with vision. Okay, when a person's feeling stuck, the best place to go is they will often have some story. I really want XYZ. I really want to become CEO, but I just don't feel like I have the skills, or I just don't feel like my manager is noticing me. So if you can first focus on the vision, what is it that you really want to achieve? Get them to articulate that really, really well. What do you want? What is your objective? What is your ideal situation here? Get them to focus on that. Then you can start figuring it out from there. If you get to that back part, because often people will go, but this, I don't have this, I don't know this, I don't feel good enough, then you can park that for a minute and rather focus on the vision and ask good questions that will help them shift their mindset to what's possible rather than the place that they're in, which is keeping them stuck and kind of making them think that it's impossible.
Thank you. There's another question from Saurabh Gupta. The main thing I wish to learn is how to be the kind of coach whom leaders will count on as a trusted partner. That is, what qualities do I need to imbibe to be a coach for leaders?
Yes. So I think that to be a trusted partner, first of all, maybe there's two parts to it. One is about the relationship. So how do you build rapport as a coach and really build that relationship so that you build trust first and foremost? For people to be able to trust you with their innermost thinking, with their innermost challenges, they need to trust you. So think of ways to build trust. And that's often sometimes by talking about different things, talking about the challenges, acknowledging feelings, really listening, sharing sometimes some of your own struggles and learnings. That helps to build trust. I know that as coaches, it's not something we want to do a lot of, but it sometimes helps to just create that relationship. And then the second thing, which I think when we're looking at leaders, it's establishing your credibility in some way. So how can you show that you have experience, that you have knowledge, that you come with something that makes you credible for this particular leader to want to work with you? So that's again, and it doesn't have to be in the session. It could be in whatever content you're putting out, in your website, in your profile, what you put on. People want to know who they're speaking to. So you don't have to bring it into a coaching session specifically, but make sure that everything, the content that you're putting out, wherever you're putting out, whether it's a newsletter or a website or a social media, that is, establishes your credibility for really being able to work with these kind of things. So an example for me would be, you know, bring in, like, you know, I spoke about the typical painful problems or challenges of CEOs. If you put that out into your communication, people will start to understand, this is a person who knows what they're talking about. They've had this experience before. And I think that gives a measure of comfort as well.
Thank you so much. Can you give examples of CEOs who have been able to display the habit stacks?
Yes, for sure. So let's have a look. Okay, here's one. I worked with a CEO who was, again, super talented, high performer, did amazing things in her business. It was a woman. And she drove her people so hard that they were burnt out, exhausted, didn't have a particularly good leadership style. She was actually considered to be a little bit of a bully, and it was very hard for people to work with her. And in fact, she got to a point where her board said to her, listen, if you are not going to improve this, you are going to need to be let go, because we can't. The culture that was being created in the business was one of distrust. People were exhausted, burnt out, weren't performing well. So she would keep on saying, but it's them, they're not performing well, they're not doing enough, she couldn't see that it was back to her. And what I did, or what we did when we worked together, was we really started with a self-leadership habit. So remember that first habit stack about being, I've lost it now, but it's a self-leadership habits where we had the zone of genius and the blind spots and the bounce back ability, okay? We looked at those. Firstly, we started with her zone of genius. What is she really good at? We then did a whole feedback exercise where we got input from her team in terms of what are the things that are holding her back, with examples of what kind of things does she do, so she could really see where her blind spots are, because she wasn't seeing where she was alienating people. And then the third was about how did we build habits for her, so they were very specific around how to bring her team together and show up as the leader that she needed to be. We started off actually with her having a team meeting and saying, I understand there's a problem here. I'm going to be vulnerable, and I'm going to share how difficult it's been for me, this journey. And I need your help in helping me be better. I've heard your feedback. I've taken on board what you've said, and help me to do that. So she created accountability with her team as well. She chose 3 different qualities that she was going to start working on. She shared those with her team, and she asked her team to hold her accountable to that. I will say that by the end of the time, well, it took a bit of time. It took, you know, these are processes. Then by a year and a half later, she actually got a promotion to like a bigger regional role, which is what she wanted. And that was really amazing. So those are the kinds of things. This required a little bit of deeper digging, getting feedback from people around her, and then creating small steps for her to start changing her habits. One of those things was to really change how she spoke, her tone of speaking, listening more. So there were a lot of things that we worked on, but that was an example of that first habit stack, which is about self-leadership habits.
Thank you so much. There's another interesting question. Most of the CEOs, CXOs are hardwired. How difficult is it to coach them?
So that's really a good question, because they are hardwired. It's true. And remember what I said about our brain just automating how we are. So it's even more difficult to change habits, right? Absolutely. The thing is, there's got to be an imperative to change. There's got to be a reason to change. So often it will be like with that example that I gave, where she was told if she doesn't change her style, she's going to get fired. Another example is with that Ben story that I gave you, where his business was stalling. So he was starting to run out of funding, and he wasn't getting the business growth that he needed to get to that next level. And he wouldn't have got more funding if he didn't get it. So there really is often an imperative, something that's saying, listen, you've got to change. Sometimes, and critical here is for our CEOs, CXOs to want to be coached, right? Because we can't coach someone who doesn't want to be coached. So if there's a really good reason, they receive feedback, or they know that their business is stalling in some way, or their performance is stalling, and someone mentions coaching and they're open to it, then you've got a fantastic combination for really being able to work with someone and help them through that leadership gap to the next level of where they need to be.
So true. There's another interesting question, and that's been my personal experience as well. So I have been a CXO and I have come across CEOs who were like this. So the question is, the diagram that you shared was wonderful, and one of the circle is business leader to elevate results. CEOs get stuck in this circle and also get rewarded or reviewed by boards for the CEO's performance on business results. How can board look at holistic approach to evaluate CEO performance? Any experiences you have for boards with growth mindset or forward-looking board? I have had an experience, Daphna, wherein I've seen a leader. I work personally with a leader who has been completely result-oriented, and as you said, get hired for results and fired for style. That person never got fired for style. The person always was completely focused on results. So all those three myths, if you see, they were the reality, actually, not the myth. And the organization really supported him in any time and every time, but just because I'm addressing it as him, but it could be a she also, so don't mistake that. But the person was always elevated by the board, just because they were wonderful results. So I mean, wonderful question, Deepak, that how can board look at holistic approach, and do you ever come across something wherein, boards have this growth mindset?
Yes, it's such a good question. I loved hearing your experience of it as well, because it's so true. And I think boards, unfortunately, often focus on the performance because that's where they're at, and that's what they need to show, and that's what they think they're there for. But I gave a talk 2 weeks ago to the Institute of Directors of South Africa, where we really were looking at, I think boards are starting to get the awareness that they need to have a more holistic view. And they did ask, how can we get the CEOs to also open their awareness to these things that I'm talking about? And I think it's really, there's an opportunity for boards here to take a more holistic view. I think it's so important if we recognize that there's a link between results and the leadership style of the CEO, we can help the CEO to get better. And I think the boards are perfectly positioned there. So I honestly think that CEOs need to work with coaches, and I think it's a longer term engagement because it's something that keeps coming up, and they need to work on themselves. And there's an opportunity here for the board to give CEOs feedback, because they know very well when the CEO is not working. They will hear what's happening on the ground, what people are saying, and they need to really be aware of that. So take initiative in terms of that. And then I say for the boards also, if you're a board member, you can take your CEO out to lunch and have a one-on-one conversation, because it's never easy to bring something like that up in a board meeting. But if you can take them out for a lunch or something and just have a conversation and give feedback, but also hear from them where their challenges are and what they are struggling with and where they need support, then you can really create an environment where it's easy to talk about these things. Because the first step is to talk about these things, and it's all about what kind of a culture are you building within the organization.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Daphna, and I'm quite cognizant of the time. So we do have still 1 or 2 more questions, a couple of them actually, but quite cognizant of the time. So if people have any questions, they can write to me directly is what I suggest, and I can relay them to you.
Absolutely. And feel free to connect with me, LinkedIn or via my website. I actually answer every email that I receive. So if you have a question that wasn't answered, pop me an email and I'll gladly answer them. I've really enjoyed speaking to you today. Thanks for inviting me, and everybody go well on your journeys.
Thank you so much, Daphna. It was such a wonderful session, and the energy levels are just amazing. So thank you so much for doing this with us, and thank you everybody. I have put in the link for the earning your CCUs in the chat box. Please save this link and submit the form within 24 hours, and we will give you your CCUs in the end of November. So thank you so much, and have a wonderful remaining part of the day. Thank you so much, Daphna, and everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.